All right, in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started. We, as a CZ Hub team, decided to do this series of mini workshops / webinars because we had originally planned to do some in-person workshops, and it's, you know, sort of the state of the world that it's still an issue for people, a lot of people to travel. Some people are uncomfortable traveling. Some people are not allowed by their institutions to travel. So instead of doing, you know, 1 to 2 day or 3 day in-person workshops, we've decided to do this series of webinars. We'd like these webinars to be for you, and we hope that they're useful for you. And if you want to give us feedback, please do. We can be flexible with the topics and the schedule. We've laid out a schedule of topics. We posted that schedule of topics to the CZ Hub website. And hopefully Maddie will be sending out invitations and notifications about the subsequent topics. And you can always go to the CZ Hub website and see what the topics are going to be. But definitely we can be flexible if you need. This first session is pretty highly focused on the people who are affiliated with data management associated with the thematic clusters. A lot of the subsequent sessions will be a bit more general and may not be quite as focused on you as data management people, but hopefully there will be relevant content in all of these for you. So thank you for attending. Thank you for signing up. We're excited about working more closely with you as we get going with data management. So I wanted to just spend a minute and introduce our team. So not all of us are here today. We've got Kirsten Leonard online. Kirsten, if you want to say hi for just a second,
hi,
maybe introduce yourself.
Am I? Yeah, I'm not muted. So yes, hi everybody.
Great, thank you. So Kirsten is at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. You may know Kirsten, you may not, but she and her group run the Earthchem library, the Earthchem repository for data. They're also running a bunch of other services and highly involved with things like the System for Earth Sample, am I getting this right? CSAR, System for Earth
Sample Registration.
Thank you, CSAR, System for Earth Sample Registration, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, and a bunch of other things too. We've got Chris Calloway, and I don't know if I can't see all the participants at once. Did Chris join us today?
I don't think Chris and David are on.
Okay, I know I just left a meeting that David was in and David was talking, so I know he's not here. Chris is at the Renaissance Computing Institute. Chris is in charge of a lot of our cyber infrastructure deployment and the actual running of the applications that we will be developing. And then Dave Tarbotton is here at the Utah Water Research Laboratory. He's serving as our liaison with the Hydroshare repository. Probably more importantly are our user support people. So we've got Lucy, who is with Kirsten's group at Columbia. Lucy is knowledgeable in all things Earthchem, CSAR, sample related data, all of that sort of stuff. And is Lucy here today, Kirsten? Do we have Lucy?
No, she isn't on. I think she misunderstood that because I'm okay. On. You didn't need to.
No worries.
But I can ask her to come on.
No worries. The next thing that I'm going to say about this group is the people that you're looking at now, including myself and at times others. These are the people that will be associated with the data help sessions that we will be doing every other week. So hopefully Lucy will be there. Shannon Surstad, who is here at the Utah Water Research Lab at Utah State University. Shannon, if you want to say hello.
Hi there, I'm Shannon, and I just realized I have two Shannons. I just shared my link with Clara, so real Shannon.
Okay. Great. And then we've got Clara Cogswell from Kuwazi also. Clara, if you want to say hello.
Yeah, hi, my name's Clara. I'm not Shannon. That's my apologies. I am on the other end of the help at kuwazi.org, and I provide user support for Hydroshare. So.
Cool, yeah, thank you. So these people will be online for the data help sessions. The intent behind those data help sessions is that we can be online, we can be answering questions that you have about data sets, data formats, metadata, all of those sorts of things. We can also use those data help sessions for a little more organized discussions about commonalities among data sets thinking about standard formats. If there are things that we're doing across the thematic clusters that we all want to be doing in the same way, we ought to be having discussions about that. So we'll be online for those data help sessions, and they'll be really informal, just Zoom meetings where we can break out into breakout groups if we need to, or we can keep it together depending on how many people we have and how many topics we need to cover on those days. Okay, so I would like to do introductions, and hopefully Maddie has managed to promote everybody so everybody can speak and you can unmute yourselves. But maybe we could just go through really quickly, and I'm going to stop sharing for just a second, just so I can see the participant list. And we'll go through the list in the order that I have here. But maybe if you'll just tell us your name, your institution, the thematic cluster that you are affiliated with, or if you're not affiliated with a thematic cluster, that's okay too. Tell us what institution you're affiliated with. And then I had a question. Are you currently in a position where you've got data from the first field season from your thematic cluster? Are you ready to share data, or we're just kind of want to get an idea of kind of where people are at? So why don't we start with John LaGrossa? John, you're the first one in my list. That's the only reason why I'm picking on you. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm John LaGrossa. I am with UMBC, and I'm part of the urban CZ cluster based out of Baltimore. I'm also very sick, so it's not coronavirus, but I can barely talk. So I'll probably just be listening today more than anything else. We have collected data over the past year, and it's currently in QA/QC. Our goal is to put it in a database and be able to create Jupyter notebooks so that people can manipulate it and visualize it. I don't know if that fits in with what you guys are planning to do, but we do also plan to publish it into the repository as well.
Cool.
That's
right. Yeah. Awesome. No, I think we can talk about those topics in upcoming workshops for sure. All right. Thanks, John. Maybe Kevin Perry next.
Sure. I'm Kevin Perry. I am at the University of Utah, and I'm the data manager for the Desk Squared CZ. And we do have a fair bit of data that we have collected over the last year that we are in a position to be able to be interested in publishing soon. So it's great timing.
Just
okay,
a quick request. If you could just say if within your cluster you're collecting samples as well, that would help me.
Sure. So we have soil samples, we have water samples, we have particles have been collected from snowpack, and we have a lot of geochemistry data that has been collected from those samples. But in addition to that, we also have biological materials that I know less about, that I'm learning about as we move further into this as well.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, John, just to follow up with you, the answer about samples is yes, right?
Yes, we have soil samples and hydrologic samples as well.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
And then,
Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, I was just going to say, in addition to that, we also have integrated physical property measurements of soil, like threshold wind velocity for emission, and eventually we're going to be having a national wind erosion network site that will have regular information on horizontal and vertical mass fluxes of soil as well.
Cool, thanks. Let's move on to Amanda Donaldson.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm actually a fourth-year PhD at the University of California, Santa Cruz, not affiliated with a cluster, but have worked at the Eel River CZO in previous years.
Awesome, welcome, thank you. Let's see, so I've got Atefa Hosseini, and I think Atefa, you were in the chat and said your phone doesn't work. But you do have collected data. It's in QA/QC, and maybe if you could just type in the chat really fast the question about samples. I'm going to guess the answer is yes. All right, yes. So the answer is yes. Okay, let's keep cruising then. Diego Calderon. Did I say that right, Diego?
Yeah, that's right. I'm a research programmer at NCSA affiliated with CINet, and we do have soil water data that we're ready to publish. And
Cool.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let's see, we've covered, the order keeps changing on me. Sorry about that. Eric Parrish, how about, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, Eric Parrish. I'm with CU Boulder. I'm with the Critical Dynamic Water Group cluster, where I'm actually with part of the old Boulder Creek CZO as well. We are collecting data, and we have a lot of legacy data that's continuing to come in, and so we have plenty of sensors there: soil moisture, temp, met stations, etc.
Right. So the answer to the question about are you ready to start sharing data is yes.
Yes,
because you have a long legacy of data.
Yeah. And I've actually even pushed a few up to Hydroshare already.
Cool. Great. That's awesome. Let's see. So Ivan Wrapup, tell me how to say that.
It's Wrapup. Hi. So my name is Ivan Wrapup, and I'm a research scientist at Virginia Tech. So I work with Steve Holbrook. So I guess I'm in the Bedrock Cluster user group. And we do have a bunch of data, but we do have to have a lock on it for now. So we cannot share it at the moment. And I'm mostly interested in creating a database for our data, since, from the geophysical perspective, it's all files, but I have some experience in database, but I'm not sure how a real database design translates into our geophysical world. So actually, I'm curious how to do that, and how to make it work, and then eventually actually look up data using references and not just looking for files. So looking forward to learning that.
Cool, great. Okay. Let's see. So we've covered Eric and John and Kevin. Lucy's here now. Lucy, do you want to take a second and introduce yourself? Sorry.
Thanks, sorry I was late. My name is Lucy Perfetta. I'm the project manager and data manager for Earthkind library. And I am looking forward to your geochemical data submissions.
Thank you, Lucy. Let's see. So Luigi Marini.
Hi, everyone. I'm Luigi Marini. I'm at the University of Illinois with Diego on the CINet Critical Interfaces Network project out of the Midwest. As Diego mentioned, we are getting new data. We also were part of the IML CZO, so we have legacy data from that one. So we have instruments that are continuing to gather data. One question I have is, we have data that we can share, but they haven't published on it yet. So they want to have some, period of embargo before they publish. So that would be my, one question for you guys is, we can share it, but can it be locked for now, or do you want us to wait until, it's ready to be published? And yes, we do have some new samples, soil samples primarily, but also some water stuff. And I think some of the soil samples have been already started to be registered with Earthkind and then Caesar, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think next is Rachel McQuiggan.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Rachel McQuiggan. I work for the Delaware Geological Survey, which is at the University of Delaware. I'm in the College of Earth, Ocean, and the Environment, and I'm with the Coastal Cluster. Yes, we do have data. A lot of it is time series data, water and ecological and survey data. And most of it is not ready to share yet, but we do have some that possibly.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, and we've got Sue Parsons.
Hi, I'm Sue Parsons. I'm affiliated with the Dryland Cluster that's based at the University of Texas, El Paso. As far as our ability to share data, we have a ton of legacy data because our field sites are the Jornada Experimental Range and Reynolds Creek Experimental Watershed, among others. And a lot of our legacy data, I was actually affiliated with the Reynolds Creek CZO prior to this, and a lot of our legacy data is already on Quasi or is in data ad commons through our USDA partners and whatnot. But we have a number of new data collections that'll probably be ready. Maybe they're in QA/QC. They'd be ready to publish maybe in about 6 months with an embargo, but we're not really there quite yet.
Okay. All right, thank you. So my question about data ready to share, I'm just trying to get kind of an idea of where people are at. I'm not necessarily poking and prodding people in any particular direction. I'm just trying to get an idea of where people are at. Did I miss anybody? I think I got everybody on the list, but did I miss anybody? Okay. Let me share my screen again then. All right, so some of you may have seen some of this before, and I will just apologize for those of you who've been here from the beginning. But for those of you who haven't been here from the beginning, or who are new to as a data manager to one of the thematic clusters, or who are just here sort of observing, our objective with the CZ Hub is to provide a robust cyber infrastructure for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data from the CZ network thematic clusters. So hopefully you've all heard of the FAIR principles. If not, there's a link here and we'll post these slides afterwards. You can go and read about the FAIR guiding principles for scientific data management and stewardship. Hopefully this is something you are all familiar with. This is our goal for data being shared by the thematic clusters. And our approach that we propose to do that is to link existing data facilities and services like the Hydroshare repository, like the Earthkind repository, using things like CSAR for registering samples and other repositories as needed, because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel and reinvent yet another repository when there are existing repositories out there that actually have good functionality. So instead, we chose to focus on creating a central CZ Hub that provides services to facilitate data submission, services that are going to enable people to actually find and access the data sets that you all are working with. And then later on, computational resources for data analysis and visualization in support of synthesis efforts that probably we won't see right away, but probably we'll be seeing a little bit later on as we get a little more integration among the different groups. So I'm going to go through just a couple things here related to our approach. So on the left here, we've got the thematic cluster network. That's all of you collecting and working with data. We've got a data submission portal, which is the main cyber infrastructure element that we proposed. I'll talk about that. And then we've got existing repositories for data and research products. I'll talk about that. And then I'm not going to spend time today talking about cataloging services or discovery services, because we don't have an awful lot of data that have been submitted by you to be discovered yet. So we'll talk about that at a later date. So when we wrote our proposal, we knew that all of you were going to be doing a lot of pretty diverse work with data collection. Some of you may not be collecting a lot of data, but may be aggregating data from other sites, maybe using existing data. And you all probably have data QA/QC procedures that you're going through. We'll all be probably creating and dealing with metadata, but there's a lot of diversity here. And that diversity was apparent as I read through all of the data management plans from the different proposals. So we want to build a CZ data management community. I apologize that we're all here virtually. This would be much better done in person, where we could, have a cup of coffee and a donut and all chat around the table. That would actually be great. And hopefully we can do some of that soon. But we also want to start having conversations about promoting best practices for consistency. Where we're collecting similar data sets, we should be thinking about sharing them in similar ways, using similar formats and describing them in similar ways, so that when somebody discovers a data set from one cluster and they find a similar data set from another cluster, they could potentially use and interpret those data in the same way. Okay, so the data submission portal, this is under construction as we speak. We've got multiple developers working on this. This is a new web-based development to support you as the data affiliated people. We're creating this portal to facilitate submission to multiple different repositories. And also, we're going to be providing some information on this portal that should help you pinpoint which repository you should be using. So as you're working through the diversity of data sets that you have, you may have questions about, well, which repository should I put this one? We'll be providing some information on this portal that should help guide you through that. We're also going to be using this portal to do just some relatively simple things to make sure that metadata are consistent. Because the different repositories that we will be using already exist and may not have the same set of rules for metadata. Like, for example, we want you all to use certain keywords when you submit data sets, and we want to make sure that you're all affiliating your data sets with your NSF grant number and putting funding agency information in there. These repositories may not require that, but we want to require that to make sure that these submissions are complete. We can do that through the data submission portal. So what we'll be promoting through the data submission portal are metadata templates, potentially data format standards, eventually controlled vocabularies, data upload templates, sample registration, and then managing the process of unique identifiers with the repositories that we're working with. So we're building this to empower you to curate data products within appropriate repositories with support from our team. We're hoping all of you can and will use this data submission portal. It's not going to be 100% mandatory. There may be some of you who want to go directly to the repository, or there may even be some of you who want to write code to insert your data directly into a repository. We can help with that as well, but hopefully most of you will be interested in using this data submission portal that we're building. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to focus initially on Earthchem, CSAR, Hydroshare. We do have a memo of understanding with open topography. So if you're dealing with LiDAR data and high resolution topography, we want to encourage those data to be deposited in open topography. So our approach here is to operate the repositories that we're affiliated with, Earthchem and Hydroshare, but also partner with other existing repositories where we need to. Okay. So on the CZ Hub website, we've published some interim data sharing guidance. And it's interim because we obviously do not have a data submission portal ready to go. We're in the process of building that right now. So there's a link here to this interim guidance for data publication. It's on the website. Hopefully you'll be able to find it. If you can't, just click on this link and it'll take you directly there. And I wanted to just walk through this really quickly because I want you all to be aware of this. There's a few just relatively simple things that you can be doing if you're ready to be submitting data now. If you're not ready to be submitting data now, it's okay. When we get to that point, some of this will be taken care of by the data submission portal, so you won't have to worry about it all. But other things you're going to want to be aware of. So first things first, how to contact us. We've set up this email, cznet@kuwazi.org. That's the email that you can use to contact us with general questions about data. If you want to join the CZNet Slack workspace, send an email to cznet@kuwazi.org. We'll make sure you get added to the Slack workspace. You'll get an invitation to join. Some of you are in there already. That's great. There's not a lot of activity there now, but there are specific channels to discuss data. We can add more channels if we need to add more channels for specific topics, but please do join that Slack workspace, because in that Slack workspace, we can be having conversations not only between you and us, the hub, but we can be having conversations among the data management group. And some of you may be able to answer each other's questions, which would be a great result if we get everybody in the Slack workspace. Okay, we're also willing to do some Zoom meetings as needed, but let's use the off-week data help sessions if we can. And if those are adequate, great. If they're not adequate, we're willing to follow up with people as needed. But let's use those data help sessions, and those will be done via Zoom. Okay, so some general guidance, and this will begin addressing a couple of the questions that came up during introductions. So We want to encourage you to start assembling your data now and not wait until later. And that's going to require some thought from you, maybe in consultation with many members of your thematic cluster team about what the specific products are going to be that your cluster will be creating and sharing. We'd like you to start assembling and documenting those as soon as possible, because the more questions you ask and the earlier you think about that, the more structured you're probably going to be able to get. And then you won't be left holding the bag at the end of your project saying, wait, I got to get all this data published. Like we don't want that to happen. So start assembling the data now and start thinking about what the products are going to be now. So along with that, start tagging your data with appropriate metadata. And that, of course, there's some common things that all the repositories that you go to are going to have: title, abstract, keywords, spatial and temporal coverage, all of that kind of good stuff. But I would encourage you to, if you're not familiar with the repositories already, go to Hydroshare, make sure you sign up and get an account, and then start looking at what it takes to create a new resource. What are the specific metadata that are required and optional? Get familiar with those data submission forms. The same thing for Earthchem, the same thing for registering samples with CSAR. Just get familiar with the process. And we are going to have workshops like this one that are going to address specifically Hydroshare, Earthchem, CSAR, Zenodo. So we'll cover those, but I think it would be good to go and take a look so that you can come to those workshops with specific questions if you have them. Okay. So general guidance continued. Start thinking about the data and file formats you will use. And if you have no clue what data or file formats you will use, that's what the data help sessions are for. And if you know that other people are collecting the same kinds of data and you don't know what data formats that you should use, we should be having a discussion about that to try and create some commonality across the clusters. Again, let's use those data help sessions for those kinds of conversations. I encourage everybody that I talk to use a README file when you're sharing data in any of these repositories, because while it's a bit of work to fill out all of the standard metadata items in, say, Hydroshare or Earthchem, you probably are going to find that there are some details that you have about the data that you want to share that maybe are not well covered by the metadata elements that are available in the repositories that we're using. You can put some of that information in a README file that goes along with the data. And that's a great way for you to record some of the specifics of the data that actually will help people with reuse. Right. So the interim guidance website that I showed you before, where all of this information came from, that's on the CZ Hub website, I've included some links to some potentially useful data management resources. And when I say resources, they're specific papers that you could read that have some ideas about general data management. Most of them are pretty good. If you want to take some time, I would recommend reading those. I think you'll find them pretty instructive. Okay, so workshop number 2 is going to focus on hitting some of the highlights of those. We were asked by the thematic cluster PI group to put together a workshop that is focused more towards graduate students. So I don't think I'm going to say anything in workshop number 2 that most of you don't already know, but it might still be good for you to come and have a little refresher. And probably you could contribute to that discussion too. All right, so which repository should you be using? Some of you may be thinking about this question already. Our initial focus for building the cyber infrastructure that we're building is going to be on Hydroshare, Earthchem, and Zenodo. Hydroshare is kind of a general purpose repository for water science related data sets and models. It has a very flexible data model. You can put pretty much anything you want into Hydroshare. Earthchem is going to be a bit more structured. It's a repository for submitting data derived from material samples such as soil, sediment, pore water, rock specimens, whatever it happens to be. And there are some recommended data templates and everything for Earthchem. It's going to be a little more structured than Hydroshare, but has a pretty good focus on what you should be submitting there. We're going to use Zenodo as a catch-all repository. We're providing support for Zenodo because we don't believe that there's any one repository that's going to work for all of the data that you all are creating. We want to encourage you to use Hydroshare and Earthchem if you can. send your LiDAR data to and high resolution topography data to Open Topography. But if there's something that you have that just isn't going to fit in any of these other repositories, then Zenodo is an option that we can potentially use. Okay. All right, I mentioned CSAR, registering samples with CSAR. Kirsten's group is going to do a workshop about that. And I also mentioned Open Topography, and we'll have a partnership with Open Topography to make sure your high resolution topography data is going to the right place. All right, I want to just say a couple of words about Hydroshare and Earthkind. So Hydroshare is operated by the Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Science Incorporated. As a community resource, you can manage data and other products throughout your research lifecycle. And I say that because the question came up, well, we have data and we could potentially upload that data, but we're not ready to share that data publicly because we have an embargo or the data are not ready to be public yet. All of the repositories that I mentioned on the previous slide, Hydroshare, Earthkind, and Zenodo, enable you to share data privately. And I would encourage you to do so because it allows you to start assembling the metadata and make sure that you have one definitive copy of the data. You can share it in Hydroshare privately with individual users. You can share it with your thematic cluster group, but you don't have to share it publicly or publish it until you are ready. And all three of those repositories have functionality that allow you to do that. Okay, so all of those repositories also have sharing and formal publication with citable digital object identifiers. So that's another point that I wanted to bring out there. So Kirsten, do you want to say a couple words about Earthkind and CSAR?
Sure. So yeah, as shown here, and you probably heard that Earthkind focuses on geochemical, petrological, geochronological data. It's basically all data that are generated by lab analytical work or field observations on samples, descriptions of samples, and so on. We specifically work with publishers. A lot of the data that we get are submitted in conjunction with publications. You're obviously not all there yet in writing the papers, but that's sort of our main influx of papers. We, as Jeff said, we do have the ability to keep data private with restricted access for up to 2 years, which can be extended if necessary, if there are reasons for it. An important aspect, and this is kind of at the bottom screenshot there, is that the data sets that are in Earthkind are related to the individual samples that have been analyzed and for which data are reported in a data set. And that allows us to make connections between individual data sets, linking different types of observations together. We also, and this may be something to talk about in the future, that we run these synthesis databases. It's kind of what I heard earlier about the one group that wants to build a database. I think it was Ivan, wants to build a database that integrates everything. That's what we do with geochemical data. We haven't done that with soil data really yet. We started it with the ZZ-ChemDB that Sue Brantley had initiated many years ago as part of the critical zone observatories. And I would love to have a workshop with those of you who generate geochemical data, if we should pursue this and really create a synthesis of these critical zone net geochemical data, but that's for later. And then CSAR, as we said, CSAR is basically a catalog of samples that stores and archives sample metadata. But the important thing is that CSAR is an allocating agent of the IGSN, no longer the International Geosample Number, but in the meantime, the global sample number, because it moved into different disciplines like archaeology and biology and so on. This is important. I mean, basically, the IGSN is like a DOI for a data set. The IGSN resolves to these metadata about the sample in CISA or to a different allocating agent if you registered it with a different allocating agent, such as the USGS coming up on that. So important that we're working very closely with the community on best practices for geochemical and sample data. And if any data will come up in the critical zone net, in the ZZ net, any geochemical methods that we haven't covered with best practices or data templates, we're happy to work with everybody to agree on such templates and then make them available to those who are wanting to use them. Yeah, I think that's it, Jeff, and more obviously in the upcoming webinars.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kirsten. Okay, so as I mentioned before, not all of your products may have a really great fit in these repositories. If you choose to submit something to a different repository, it'd be great to have a conversation with that about that. We're open to talking about that if you have questions. But what you should be looking for in any repository that you're considering submitting to is a public landing page for your data set and product, a unique and persistent identifier. An example of that is a digital object identifier, or DOI, and a persistent URL for accessing the landing page for your resource, and then make sure that you can create a formal citation for your data set or product. Those are the things that you should be looking for as you're considering repositories. And if you do deposit into a repository other than the ones that we're supporting with the data submission portal, we'll provide some guidance down the road on how to tell us about these data sets, because another one of the things that we committed to do as part of our work is creating basically cataloging and discovery across all of the thematic cluster data sets. And we want to make sure that we know about all of the data sets so that we can do that effectively. Okay, so a few specific things in the interim before the data submission portal becomes available, regardless of which repository you submit to, regardless if it's Hydroshare, Earthkind, whatever, tag your data set or product with a subject keyword of CZNet. We're going to be able to use that as a way to sort of search through things and find things. So make sure you tag something with a keyword of CZNet. Ensure that you enter funding agency information, including the National Science Foundation, your thematic cluster's award number, and then your award title, to make sure that, again, we have something else that we can use to search these repositories for, to make sure anything that gets submitted now before the data submission portal is operational, we can find those data sets and make sure that we can catalog them. Okay, another thing is make sure the data set's publicly available. If it's not publicly available, we're not going to be able to see it. If you're not ready to make it publicly available, just make sure that when you're ready for it to be shared and cataloged so that people can find it, it is publicly available. Okay? So the data submission portal is going to handle these things, but not all repositories that you may consider submitting data to will be supported by the portal. And or you may submit data before the portal is ready. As we already discussed, people are already ready to submit data now. So, okay, I wanted to say a few words about communities and group functionality. Another way that we can sort of organize data within these repositories is using community and group functionality. In Hydroshare, we've set up groups for each of the thematic clusters. And when you load something up into Hydroshare, you can share that data set or whatever the product is with your thematic cluster group. And when we have the CZNet community set up in Hydroshare, whatever you've shared with your group is automatically going to be affiliated with the CZNet community. In Earthchem, there is a critical zone community. When you submit data to Earthchem, you can say, please affiliate my data with the CZNet community in Earthchem. And same thing in Zenodo. We've set up a critical zone data and research products community in Zenodo. When you submit to Zenodo, you're filling out the data submission form. There's a community section and it says, which community would you like to affiliate your data with? If you put in the critical zone data and research products community, we'll get a notification to approve that, and we'll know that that data set exists in Zenodo. So that's another way for us to actually know that you are submitting data and it's affiliated with CZNet. And of course, I want to just keep plugging, register your physical samples with CSAR. That's an important thing. Kirsten's going to talk more about that in a later workshop. Okay, so for those data sets and products that you may be submitting to any other repositories, keep a list of those for now. Make sure you have a good identifier, a URL, or a citation. When the data submission portal is complete, we're going to provide functionality for you to register those data sets with the portal. And that step will basically just be, here's a data set that I've submitted to another repository. Here's the URL and some really basic pointers. We can add that to our metadata index so that we can provide search capabilities. We'll have that functionality a little bit later on. It's not ready yet. It'll be part of the data submission portal. Okay. Just to give you a primer of some of the upcoming topics. So next week, we're going to have our first data help session. Then on November 10th, we're going to have this session, Simple and Effective Methods for Managing and Sharing Scientific Data. That's totally repository agnostic. It's sort of the data management 101. We're focusing that on students, investigators, and anybody else who want to develop some simple methods for making their data more shareable, more interoperable, all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, we're doing these data help sessions every other week. So November 24th, we're going to talk about Hydroshare, sharing data and research products in Hydroshare. And then before AGU, we'll talk about Earthchem. Then we're not going to do anything the week of AGU or the 2 weeks during sort of the Christmas break. And then we'll hit it again starting January 5th with registering samples with Earthchem. And then we'll keep going from there. There's several other topics after that, but I didn't put them all on this slide.
December 8th, submitting data to Zenodo.
We swapped a couple topics. Sorry, Shannon.
Oh, okay.
This is probably news to you because it happened yesterday. Okay. Questions. That's all I have for presentation today. With the presentation sessions, we're planning on somewhere between 15, 20, 30 minutes of presentation and leaving about half the time for questions and discussion. I know we've done a little bit more than that today because we did introductions and stuff. So do you have questions at this point that we can potentially discuss and address?
There's some questions in the chat that Shannon and I didn't get to.
Okay, let's see. Sorry, I have a hard time chewing bubble gum and walking at the same time. So let me look at the chat really fast first, and then I see Luigi's got his hand up. So
well, that's why we kept answering questions that came in while you were talking. So
perfect. Clara, do you know which ones did not get addressed?
Let's see. I know that Sue Parsons' question, does submitting via this portal automatically list a metadata record for the data set on Quasi, by which I assume you mean on Hydroshare, unless that's not the case, but
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me describe to you how the portal is going to work. So the portal itself is not a repository. The portal is basically just a doorway for you to get things into these repositories. So when you're looking at a data submission form in the portal, that data submission form is actually going to interact directly with Hydroshare, Zenodo, or Earthchem. And when you hit go, it's going to submit that metadata and the data files that you submit to the portal directly to Hydroshare. It's going to create a resource in Hydroshare. It's going to create everything that you need for that resource in Hydroshare. And then it's going to create a record that you've submitted that resource to Hydroshare. So you could come back to the portal and say, let me see that resource. And if you want to see it or edit it in the portal, it's going to retrieve whatever you've submitted to the repository from the repository. So all of the metadata storage and the data storage is going to be happening in the repositories. The portal is just going to be a way for us to basically get the metadata from you and get it into the repository. Does that answer your question, Sue?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
It's also, I should mention, I think from both sides, from Hydroshare and Earthchem, by getting the metadata into these repositories, the metadata will also show up in, or will be searchable through other systems such as Data One, because they automatically harvest from these repositories. And so, you know, you can discover, you can see the metadata actually in other systems as well that collaborate with these repositories.
So Eric, I'm seeing a couple of things from you in the chat, geophysical data and DOIs and ongoing data sets. And I'm not sure at what point you posed those questions, but maybe you want to address those?
Well, the geophysical one was fairly early on, and someone came back with a kind of answer. Said, "Look at Iris, it's the just repository that you guys are thinking about using for that kind of data, correct?"
Kirsten, you must have answered that.
Me, Iris? we can. I mean, I think it would be a good way to make sure that the data goes into the right domain repository. Not being entirely sure what the data is, it could be Iris, it could be UNAFCO, even though they fairly close anyway. But we should talk to them and see that we can link up.
Okay. And the second thing was about DOIs and ongoing data sets. Is it possible? I mean, you can't publish, you know, and you don't want to also produce 10,000 data sets every time a paper comes out, right? So
right. So it's actually an ongoing issue for me personally, because my research group is managing the data from a research watershed here in the Logan River, and we're using some of the older quasi-hydrologic information system infrastructure for our sort of day-to-day data streaming into an observations data model database. But we've written a software utility that hooks up to that ODM database and basically parses the time series data from the ODM database into ASCII text files in Hydroshare. And it runs either every day or once a week to update Hydroshare resources with ASCII text files that are just time series text files. Now, the reason why we're doing that is, number one, the people who are working with the data said, I don't want to call web services. I don't want to do this whole water one flow thing. I don't want to have to go to the Hydro client every time I want data. I just want a text file that I can download and use. So that was number one. And then number two is, like, it's just easier to point people at Hydroshare in a lot of contexts. So under the hood, we're using the quasi-hydrologic information system for our streaming data. Doesn't really matter how you're managing your streaming data, but then we've written code to automate the uploading of those text files to Hydroshare. To specifically answer your question, Eric, none of the resources that contain our ongoing data collection that's updated every day or every week for our continuous data collection sites are formally published with a digital object identifier. However, in Hydroshare, they do have a persistent URL. They do have a persistent Hydroshare identifier that you could potentially use. I realize it's not a DOI and everybody wants a DOI, but the identifier is persistent, URL is persistent, and it's the exact same resource in Hydroshare. It just doesn't have a DOI that's registered with, like, DataSite.
yeah, and that's kind of what I've been telling folks. You know, we can use URLs because they are consistent, but, you know, like you said, everybody wants a DOI. Of course, I don't know too many papers actually require a DOI for a data set at this point, but, you know.
Publishers do. Many publishers want the DOI.
Yeah, published, they do. Okay, I've not seen one yet, but okay. But that's the issue, right? So I know it's an ongoing issue. It's been a problem for a long time.
Yeah, and to address the specific question of the paper, a lot of times people will use a subset of those data for a paper. And if they really, really need that DOI, they can cut the subset out and say, this is the specific subset of data that I used for the paper in the form that I used it for the paper. And oh, by the way, here's the code that I used to analyze the data, make a Hydroshare resource out of that. It gets the DOI, and that's what actually gets cited.
Yeah, that was going to be my strategy as well, you know, but I just wanted to see if there's any update on how we handled this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, keeping cruising here. Okay, I think that's everything from the chat. So Luigi, you still got your hand up. Sorry that took a while to get to you.
Oh, no, no worries. I have a couple of, so first of all, thank you for doing this. This was great. I really like the idea of these data management sessions and how you're, planning on alternating. So when you have the hands-on one, you already mentioned that there might be some specific topics for the one in November. So I just was wondering, just in terms of expectations, the one that are hands-on, will they actually have specific topics, or is just show up and talk about anything?
Thank you for asking that question. So we do not have an agenda for any of the data help sessions at this moment. They're totally free, they're totally unstructured. They're your time to interact with us and ask whatever questions that you may have. However, if during those discussions we find out that you and Eric and John and Sue are all doing something really similar, we could say on the next data help session, let's focus on this specific kind of data. Totally open to doing that. We can use those data help sessions for structured conversations about specific things. If you want to do that, it's totally up to all of you.
That sounds great. Thank you. And I have two more quick questions. One is, so where will the global list be of all the resources? So you're saying, right, that we're gonna, put in all these repositories, but the submission platform is not the full list. How do you envision that look like?
So we are currently in the process. The actual discovery and sort of this coordinated view of everything that is CZNet data is on our agenda. It's something we committed to do. It's a little bit further down the road in terms of our task structure and the actual timeline. We anticipate that we will be providing a data discovery functionality and a search index that will have all of the data sets submitted by all of the thematic clusters available for discovery in one place. What that looks like, we're actually in the process of working through the functional specifications right now. And it may be that we decide, oh, we have to build something new, but it may be that we decide based on our functional specifications that we can employ existing functionality from existing tools. So if you have thoughts and ideas about what you want that to look like and how you want it to work, please feel free to send us your ideas, because we're actually in the process of hashing out what that functionality should look like. And then based on those functional specifications, we'll come up with a technical implementation. But that's something, yeah, we're going to have to build that.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I was curious more in preparation. So, as we add the metadata, as we start using the different repository, I'm thinking like, okay, is it going to be a third thing, a separate thing, and what it's going to look like so we can make sure we're ready for that. Right.
Now, I want to tell you that shouldn't require any additional effort from you. Fingers crossed, right? So, and I want to encourage you to use the data submission portal when it comes online, because if you submit things through the data submission portal, we know they're going to a repository that we know about. We know they're going to be tagged with the right keywords. We know they're going to have the funding agency information in them. And we have the record of what's been submitted through the data submission portal. All of those things we can use to make sure that we can build this metadata index, and we have the list of all of the resources. If you're not using the data submission portal, it becomes a little bit harder for us, but we can still hopefully make that entirely seamless to use so that you don't have to do additional work.
And you mentioned a follow-up question. You mentioned that we can talk directly to the APIs on things like Hydroshare and some of these systems. Do you plan on having an API on the data submission portal? Because that would make sure that we, what you just said, that we have all the fields,
Yeah. I've talked to Scott, our main backend developer, about that. We think that's going to be possible. We think that's something that we can provide, but hold off on quoting me on that. But I think we're actually going to be able to make that work.
Awesome, thank you. That would be really cool. And sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions. Please, somebody else raise their hand if they have questions. The role of Zenodo versus Hydroshare. So you mentioned Hydroshare is for hydrology, but for the CZOs we put everything in Hydroshare. So Zenodo, you said, is a backup. So do you want us to try to put everything in Hydroshare and then use Zenodo as a backup, or do you want us to use Hydroshare specifically for hydrology data and then Zenodo and others for other things?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. I don't want this to sound really self-serving because I am affiliated with Hydroshare. Like I've spent a ginormous amount of my life on Hydroshare. We're encouraging people to use Hydroshare and Earthkind because we think it's the right place for the data to go. And one of the reasons why we think it's the right place for the data to go is because there's already a huge corpus of data in Hydroshare from the legacy CZOs. There's already data from the CZOs in Earthkind. And it would be nice if we weren't unnecessarily spreading data in a million different places. Zenodo is a backup because there may be some people who just say, well, it's hydro. It just doesn't fit, right? I just don't think it fits. And we definitely don't want the lack of something without the word hydro in it to be a barrier for somebody who wants to share data from one of the thematic clusters. But as I said, I think we would encourage you to submit things to Hydroshare and Earthkind first, unless there's a really good reason why you should potentially be using Zenodo. It's an option. It's an option that we're going to support. But that's sort of the guidance that I would give. Kirsten, I don't know if you have anything else that you would say.
Just kind of emphasizing that what you're saying about Hydroshare and Earthkind is about, Earthkind is really the place for anything that was any data generated on samples, because that's the specific structure of the data that will allow us in the future to make these syntheses and so on. And we have a review process, that involves Lucy, who looks at everything that comes in and so on. While, Hydroshare really has the focus with time series and other data and so on. And if we manage to talk to IRIS and get them involved, or get UNAFGO and open topography, then there are places that really have the expertise and the structures and to deal with their type of data. And I really hope that this model that we're taking here and making sure that the different very specialized repositories with their expertise are being used for the data types that fit best into them is sort of a model that ensures the highest level of data quality and reusability.
Okay, thanks, Kirsten. We're at the end of our hour, so I want to just say thank you for everybody for coming. I'm really looking forward to attending these every week, and I'm really looking forward to the conversations that we're going to have and working together. I've got just a few more minutes, so I won't just cut us off right at the moment, but anybody who has to go can go. I also, Luigi asked the question in the chat whether the slides will be available. We will be posting the slides and the recordings for these sessions on the main website, which hopefully you've got a link to that now. If you don't have a link to that, shoot me an email, let me know. We'll make sure that gets out, but you should be able to find it on the CZ Hub website. And I don't think we're going to record the data help sessions because they may be more free form and I'm not sure how many people are going to be there or whatever. We will record each one of these presentation sessions and they should be available after the fact. Okay, any last questions? All right, not hearing any, then we will look forward to seeing some or all of you next week for our first data help session. And we'll see you.
Bye.
Thanks, see ya.